Story 1. Are you too sick to perform your duties? Call in sick. Are you likely to infect your coworkers with what you have? Call in sick. Do you feel unwell and do not want to be around other people? Call in sick. Story 2. High fever and contagious illnesses can spread easily. It is important to consider the impact on others and not risk getting additional people sick at work. Story 3. I work with food and respect my coworkers. If I am sick, I will not go unless they absolutely need me. Story 4. If I feel that I am unable to do my job physically, I call off. I have a physical job, and I cannot just sit around when I am not feeling well. Whenever I have a fever, I avoid coming in to prevent passing it on to vulnerable individuals. Story 5. I work with children who are often coming in sick, so I frequently go in sick as well. If I have a fever over 100.5 degrees, am vomiting or feel too unwell to get through the day, I will stay home. Story 6. Before COVID-19, I would have to be very unwell to stay home. After COVID-19, I protect myself and my coworkers, so I stay home if I am even mildly sick. Story 7. If you are in healthcare, there isn't a too sick to not work. But for others, if you are sick, you are sick. There isn't a magic level of illness you have to reach before deciding not to go to work. If you feel unwell enough to even question this, stay home and rest. Your health needs to be a priority. Story 8. I am unwell. I don't have to explain myself for taking a day off. They don't need to justify why they could terminate my employment, so I won't share any details with them. I'm sick. I can't come in. End of discussion. Story 9. Anything contagious can spread easily. To prevent illness, focus on your recovery so that you do not pass it on to your coworkers. Create a cycle of recovery instead of repeating the cycle of getting sick repeatedly. Story 10. I work in maintenance at a food processing plant. If I have even a cough, I'm supposed to take the day off and wait 48 hours. However, I only have 9 points remaining. Story 11. Stuffy nose with a sore throat. The culture of working when feeling unwell is unproductive. Stay home when you are sick. Story 12. Personally, when I feel pain, my pain tolerance is high, so when I experience it, I know it's severe. Additionally, if I have a fever, I just want to lie in bed and rest. Story 13. Not much. My former employer recently laid off staff and wants us to use our sick days. I am going to miss that place. It was a special environment where people stayed for 15 to 30 years. It was the only job that really depressed me when I left. The work was very interesting. I got to use my brain, and the days always went by fast. I hope I can be lucky enough to find a new job like that again. Story 14. As an oncology nurse, if I am not feeling well, I will stay home. Unfortunately, not everyone has that option. If you must work while sick, please wear a mask. Story 15. If I feel like I need the day to rest, I will take it. My workplace does not know or care what is best for me. I am not willing to compromise my long-term well-being for an 8-hour shift. Story 16. Migraines, fever, and nausea can sometimes occur simultaneously. I can manage interactions with people, including my children and coworkers, when I have a mild headache. However, when it begins to develop into a migraine, I start considering the option of calling in or going home. I apparently turn a gray color when I experience a severe migraine, so some of my coworkers can tell when I am unwell. Occasionally, nausea accompanies a severe migraine, and very rarely, a fever may also occur. Fortunately, these symptoms do not happen often, so I am grateful for that. Story 17. I just had the worst cold for almost 3 weeks. I can't call out sick since I haven't been in this job long enough to qualify for sick pay. I can't afford it. I believe I have a fever, and I can barely move, similar to my 2 previous COVID-19 infections. Working in a casino feels like being in a petri dish. Story 18. I can't stay awake and can't leave the bathroom. Any discomfort is enough to constantly occupy my thoughts. Story 19. Depends on what you consider sick. Fever? Stay home. Sniffles or a runny nose? Stay home. Even if you know it's allergies, no one wants to listen to you blow your nose all day. Body aches? Stay home. Headache? Stay home. You can't concentrate on your work even if it's mild. Mental health issue? Stay home. If you feel overwhelmed by incessant questions or meetings that could be emails, it's best to take a mental health day. If you can't concentrate, you aren't helping anyone by being there. Your work will suffer more by powering through than by taking a day off for your mental well-being. Story 20. Just to name a few examples. 1. I was on a new anxiety medication, and one of the side effects was dizziness. That was manageable until I woke up one weekday morning, and the entire room was spinning, even with one foot on the ground to keep me stabilized. Fever as a symptom of a cold or flu. There is no need for an explanation. I work in a school system. If you have a fever, they do not want you coming in. Nausea. I am not going anywhere, not even to work. Just to name a few. Story 21. For a long time, I pushed through because I'm in sales and believed that lost time meant lost commissions. Eventually, I realized that, first, I was already making enough and could afford not to panic about missing a commission. Second, it was important not to get others sick. Most importantly, I recognized that no one I worked for truly cared about my well-being except me. Now, I take time off when I feel I need a day, whether physically or, more importantly, mentally. Story 22. I won't go in if I have a cough, runny nose, or sore throat. I don't want to be responsible for getting my coworkers sick. It feels like someone coughing at work is equivalent to a gunshot going off, and everyone side-eyes those individuals for being there that day. I should clarify that if I don't go in, I have the option to work from home. If I feel too dizzy to look at my computer, I'll take the day off. Story 23. Sick enough that you don't think you can effectively do your job. This includes being fed up with coworkers' nonsense. Story 24. The criteria are straightforward, regardless of your job. Call in if your illness makes you too uncomfortable to work, physically or otherwise, can spread to anyone else, can potentially worsen without proper rest or care, physically or otherwise. Beyond that, disregard any second thoughts you may have. Always prioritize your well-being, as very few jobs will prioritize you or are worth your health. Story 25. The wind blew the wrong way. I'm joking, but basically anything contagious, such as vomiting, diarrhea, coughs, or colds accompanied by a fever, means I won't go into the office. Depending on how I feel, I might work from home, and I will take a mental health day when I need it. I absolutely dislike people who force themselves to come into work while contagious. I also dislike schools that push attendance when a child is sick. I tend to keep my children home for various illnesses, but some inconsiderate parent who doesn't want to deal with a sick child sends their contagious kid to nursery, and suddenly everyone has to call out sick. My mother was also guilty of this. If we could walk, we had to go to school, even when I couldn't walk due to an accident on my bike that caused significant injury to my knee, which is now causing issues in my 30s. I didn't need medical attention because my mother cleaned it up herself. Even if we were sent home from school, we had to attend first. When I worked as a zookeeper, the same policy applied. You couldn't call in sick. You had to show up and be sent home, or you faced disciplinary action. We live in a society where being sick is frowned upon. Story 26. Feeling unwell? Take a sick day. Car troubles? You're feeling unwell because your car is having issues. Is your child or spouse unwell? You're feeling unwell because you need to care for them. You are unwell if you say you are unwell. That's final. Story 27. I broke a rib and tried to tough it out. 5 days later, I developed a horrible wet cough. I was diagnosed with pneumonia. Sometimes you should just rest so things don't get worse. Story 28. It depends. If you are an employee, any level of sickness is too sick to go to work. If you are an employer, it does not matter. You must show up. Story 29. Too sick to work from home generally requires serious fatigue, fever, or sleep deprivation. I called out sick last week when I could barely stand and needed to nap and drink tea all day. Story 30. Sometimes I experience debilitating migraines and have to stay home. Occasionally, medication works and sometimes it does not. When the medication does not work, I am stuck in bed. Additionally, there are illnesses like the flu and COVID-19. Story 31. I have a fever and cough and I'm sick in bed. I prefer to be at work, but you should not go to work when you are contagious. Story 32. I typically follow the same guidelines as my children's school. No fever over 100 degrees. Do not return until the fever is below 100 degrees for 24 hours without medication, and no vomiting for 24 hours. If I test positive for COVID-19, then I do not go. If I feel extremely unwell and struggle to get out of bed, I do not go. However, as a parent, if I took time off every time I had a sniffle or a slight cough, I would likely get fired. Story 33. I am an over-the-road truck driver. I haven't called in sick in 5 years, but for the last 3 days, I have been unable to move due to illness. I do not know what my breaking point is, but it feels like it is somewhere around throwing up. Story 34. If you are contagious and might get me sick, please stay at home. Do not make your problem my problem. Story 35. If I feel like I am going to have an accident during my daily commute, even after my morning bathroom visit, I will stay home. If I have a headache that makes it hard to focus on my drive, I will stay home. If I get a leg cramp, I may stay home if it is severe. To me, severe means I cannot put much weight on it and need to massage and stretch it out for most of the day. It impairs my driving since I drive a manual vehicle and need both legs. Story 36. Like the user the Mighty Goat Man said, if I get out of bed and feel unwell and dizzy, I will call in sick as well. Especially if I know I won't be able to look at my computer screen for even a minute. Story 37. Coffee. If I don't feel up to having a coffee in the morning, it looks like a day where I am too sick to be productive at work. Story 38. The biggest part of the problem is that many lower-wage workers do not have paid time off. They go to work sick because they cannot afford not to. The United States is a significant concern. Story 39. If I am contagious, have a fever over 99 degrees, or have unpleasant symptoms related to my digestive system. Story 40. If you have to ask this, you must have a well-paid, important job that only you are an expert in, or your boss is difficult to work with. Story 41. If I don't feel safe driving, am having difficulty thinking clearly enough to present something, or if I am feeling physical pain. Story 42. I work as a field service technician. If I don't feel it's safe for me to be on the road and endangering others, I will take the day off or inform my manager to use my sick days or paid time off. There have been times when I was very ill and still performed my job as expected, but there were moments when I thought I was going to pass out and crash. It was frightening and not a good feeling. Story 43. At this point in my healthcare career, I have learned that the worst thing you can do is not show up. If I can physically make it to the hospital, I will be at work. I wear a mask every day, so I likely won't get others sick. I would appreciate it if we could culturally call out sick when necessary, but it simply doesn't work that way. I get paid a lot to do something I love, and I don't want to jeopardize that for the chance of someone catching a cold. Story 44. When I was working on an hourly contract, my body would still be getting paid until they found me. I worked alone, so I wasn't concerned about taking anyone with me. Story 45. Anything that is contagious or prevents you from performing your job can be serious. I called in sick when I could no longer talk due to severe laryngitis. I was training people and needed to speak above a whisper. Story 46. Depends on working from home or going in. If anything affects sight or cognition, stay in bed. For anything that requires constant access to the restroom, stay at home and preferably in peace. For broken legs or any contagious conditions, work from home. It's better than the alternative. Story 47. It depends. If it is something contagious and makes you feel unwell, then you should take some time off because spreading it to your coworkers will only worsen the situation for everyone involved, including the business. This is especially important if you work in food production for obvious reasons. Story 48. I am fortunate to be primarily working from home, although I do go into the office at least once a week. At my organization, it is the norm to stay home if you have any kind of cough or cold. No one wants the risk of getting sick, and it is not necessary to be in the office. However, there are times when you end up working from home even when you are probably too ill to do so. Story 49. Contagious conditions can worsen my situation or delay my recovery, especially when it affects my voice. Could I go to work with a migraine if I take strong medication? Possibly. Would it turn into a 3-day ordeal instead of just one? Am I good at following these guidelines? No. I once tried to go to work with a kidney stone. Don't do as I did. Story 50. If you have any type of fever, even low grade, for less than 24 hours without medication, please call out. Story 51. Am I contagious with a cold or flu? Yes, I call in sick. Can I safely drive? No, I call in sick. Can I focus enough not to endanger anyone at work? No, I call in sick. Story 52. If you literally feel like you can't get out of bed and you are doing things that might spread it, such as coughing or sneezing, please stay home. Story 53. If I have a fever, I am contagious. If I am actively showing symptoms, I am contagious. The moment I am no longer contagious, I will be back. Story 54. I would say that if you have a fever or are leaking bodily fluids such as mucus, diarrhea, or sweating, it is important to avoid working around people. If you work from home, it is only necessary to take time off if your condition affects your ability to focus. In either case, resting is the best option if you want to perform at your best. Story 55. When I have a fever, feel unwell, or have a stomach ache, I can't work. I'm unable to focus when I'm dizzy, feeling extremely cold in a windowless office with the air conditioning on, or when I need to spend more time in the restroom than working. Sometimes, when I'm feeling lazy and don't want to work, I use stomach ache as an excuse at the clinic. Now, my colleagues think I have a sensitive stomach. I'm open to more creative excuses if anyone has suggestions. Story 56. Fever, vomiting, migraine, or a bad cold when I am clearly contagious. There was one time when I had all of these symptoms at once, including pneumonia. Story 57. As soon as I realize I much prefer to be at home in bed than working for someone else, I will call in sick. Me yesterday. Story 58. If you are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, report sick. If you have influenza or the flu, report sick. If you cannot walk, report sick. If you have a fever, report sick. Remember, the company, especially human resources, is not your friend. Take care of yourself first and foremost. Story 59. It depends on the job, but a good rule of thumb is to consider whether your decision will make others sick and affect the situation for the following week. Story 60. Hangnail. Just kidding. Now that I mostly work from home, as long as I can get my laptop open on my hospice bed, we're good. Story 61. Basically, if I am contagious, I will not go, but the rest I will attend. I run my own small business, and there is no one to cover for me. Story 62. Am I able to be off the toilet for at least an hour at a time? Am I able to keep down water and crackers? Do I have a fever? Am I able to avoid crying in front of coworkers? If all the above requirements are met, I can go to work normally. Story 63. Always work through being sick. Then you feel less guilty when you take random days off when you're not sick at all. Story 64. I think the line is, can you control the fluid-like substances expelling from either end? If you can't, stay home. Story 65. Having to deal with nausea or constant diarrhea is challenging. It's surprising to see the new generation taking sick days for a stuffy nose. Story 66. If I have a severe headache or feel nauseated, I won't go. If all I can think about is sleep for relief, then I can't focus on anything and I don't even want to move. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, I am completely down. Story 67. I work in a hybrid arrangement, spending more time at home than in the office, so I will work with a cold, but not with a stomach bug or the flu. The only time I have taken off in the past several years was for surgeries, and I took 2 days. Story 68. I can work remotely, so if it's just a matter of being contagious but I feel relatively fine, I will work from home. If I'm sick to the point where I know I need actual rest to get better and my productivity will decrease, I will take a sick day. Story 69. Under any of the following conditions, constant trips to the bathroom due to vomiting, as this would be too disruptive and not making it in time would be disastrous. This also somewhat applies to diarrhea, but I have managed to work around a bad case of it. Vomiting is not so manageable. Frequent bouts of coughing to the point of pain, as this can spread my illness to other coworkers. Any other condition where I feel incredibly weak, unwell, or bedridden. Story 70. It depends on whether I have paid time off and if it is my Friday. If both conditions align, I might consider calling in sick. Story 71. If I have anything more than a sniffle or runny nose, I am not going in. It is a benefit to have an employer who values my health. Story 72. Because I work from home, this is a bit different for me. I will not go out into public if I have a fever and cannot be more than 15 feet away from a bathroom at any time. What will prevent me from actually working is the following: extreme fatigue, a high enough fever that I cannot think straight, being in so much pain that I cannot focus. These conditions indicate that I need to let myself rest to recover. Story 73. If I can still fake enthusiasm without sounding like a dying whale, I will be there. Otherwise, I will stay in bed with my regrets. Story 74. To be totally honest, I haven't been sick in many years, aside from COVID-19. However, I have taken many sick days. Story 75. Anything to the point where I can't do my job without common interruptions, such as vomiting, diarrhea, a fever of 103 degrees or higher, or lacking the energy to stand for long periods. Story 76. I need to be significantly hindered by any issue to the point where I can't perform my job effectively. Any matter related to hygiene is an automatic reason to call in. Story 77. If there is crust in the corner of your eye when you wake up, that is more than enough reason to take the day off and care for yourself first. Story 78. Not feeling well. I suddenly came down with an illness, so I can't come into work today, boss. Story 79. If I know my wellness state will impact others, whether it is bad pain making me grumpy, a fever, or a cold, I will be working from home since I have the luxury of doing so. Story 80. Do I feel like I can function as a human before taking medication? If yes, I will go to work. If no, the medication is not going to change that much anyway, so I will stay home and rest. I work with children, which means nearly constant exposure to cold and flu. Even without a fever or vomiting, sometimes it is better to avoid spreading illness for a day or two, even if that inconveniences other staff. Story 81. I work from home, so I am quite sick. As long as I can comfortably perform any kind of work, whether at my desk or lying down with my laptop, I will be working. The only time I take sick leave is when I am recovering from something more serious. Story 82. In my younger days, I could push through anything to keep working. Migraine? No problem, I would push through. Food poisoning? I would carry a bucket and manage. Thrown out back? I had my cane. I could handle it. A significant cut that would definitely need stitches? Just hand me a towel. I would deal with it later. Now it's like, oh no, I stubbed my toe. I need a week off to recover. Aging is challenging. Story 83. If there is a risk of infecting someone else, or if I am forced to be in the bathroom for long periods, I call in sick. Story 84. Any level of stomach sickness or a fever is concerning. Otherwise, I try to wear a mask and push through. I do not have much sick leave, and as a specialist teacher, missing days unexpectedly can disrupt a project for specific classes without a proper way to catch up. Additionally, writing substitute plans can be frustrating, especially knowing they will likely be overlooked. Story 85. Fever, diarrhea, or vomiting. It depends on the situation. Fever or vomiting is certain. I'm in a truck all day without easy access to a restroom. If my stomach is upset, especially if I have paid time off, I'm staying home. Story 86. I can work from home, so the only time I will call in sick is if I need to be in bed. However, I'm not saying I don't use my 8 paid sick days for headaches throughout the year. Story 87. If my illness is distracting enough, that's it. If I am constantly shivering, getting up every 30 seconds to blow my nose, or experiencing a bad headache that requires me to lie down, it varies. Sometimes it's just extreme fatigue, and I need to sleep all day while dealing with body aches. I can manage low energy, but I respect my body when it is not doing well, and I recognize that I have the luxury to do so. Story 88. I am lucky that my work model is still hybrid. Honestly, a bad headache or upset stomach is more than enough to keep me working from home for the day. When I worked full-time in the office, I often had to push through and go in feeling unwell. Story 89. Contagious. Having a fever above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. If my body aches cannot be relieved with a higher dose of ibuprofen, do not attempt this without consulting a healthcare professional. The maximum recommended dosage is 3,200 milligrams in total. Do not exceed this amount. Story 90. I have a fever and headache, along with vomiting, but I can still work with a cough. However, I rarely get sick enough to miss work. I haven't missed a day due to legitimate illness in at least 6 years. Story 91. Now retired, my last employer talked about family but frequently used a will. We had a built-in excuse if we were sick, as we worked directly with dependent adults in their homes. If we were ill, we could call in. If no hourly staff were available to cover, the supervisor would have to step in. The supervisor could and did remove shifts as punishment. I was permanently unscheduled from one site for taking an extra 2 days off after surgery when cleared to return to work. They showed no concern at all, and I witnessed people being fired for giving notice. Story 92. Since I work from home, I usually put in some time regardless of how sick I feel. On the other hand, I will also start taking time off sooner. For example, if I am slightly sick, I might only work for 7 hours, and if I am very sick, I might still manage to work for 2 hours. Story 93. Because of our extremely generous paid time off policy, I take time off whenever I am ill. I have been ill a lot this year, but I wasn't that much last year. Story 94. I believe I may not be able to safely make it to work and back home again. If I can endure it, I will. Story 95. I had to work with gastro once. I maintained contactless communication and kept a distance of 1 meter, pulling over on the side of the road to either vomit or use the bushes. I couldn't take any more painkillers for the headache due to the risk of overdose. It was the worst day of work ever, but I still had to get through it. Story 96. I arrived to tutor 2 high school students with blood running from my nose for 2 hours. I mentioned that my nose surgery was feeling better, and if they weren't afraid of blood, I would be happy to teach them. I held a tissue to my nose for 2 hours, changing tissues every 20 minutes, while teaching with the other hand. After about 2 hours, the sinus pressure that had been causing me tears finally eased. Story 97. Contagious. So ill that it's unsafe to drive. I feel so unwell that it affects my performance to the point where I do not earn my wage for the day. Story 98. Now, if I have a slight headache or discomfort, I would have never considered myself too sick a couple of years ago. Story 99. If it's something I can pass on to someone, I stay home. I actually suffer from chronic nausea and vomiting, where sometimes I just start throwing up. Some days it's so bad that I'm vomiting more than 5 times in an hour, and there's no way I'm going to or staying at work. Many times I've left work and gone to the emergency room right after. I'm not suggesting you do what I do, but if it's something chronic and non-contagious, you should know your limits and when to call it. If it's a hangover, take a vitamin B12, a pain reliever, and grab some cucumber lime sports drink. Get something greasy like a biscuit sandwich and go to work. I hope this helps. Story 100. I work from home and really have no reason to miss work due to a cold or something similar, as I don't have to go to the office, and there's no chance of infecting someone else. I have even worked through pneumonia, severe headaches, and nausea. I often experience severe nausea due to the medications I take, to the point of being unable to even sit. In the past 2 years, I took only 1 sick leave, and I only took it because I was feeling abdominal pain that I suspected might be appendicitis. Luckily, it wasn't. I guess I draw the line at appendicitis level pain when it comes to taking a day off. Story 101. Even though there is no penalty for calling in sick or taking a day off when needed, I still feel the need to justify it to myself. I will call in sick if I have a fever or a severe headache. Story 102. If I have something contagious, I will call out. I also notified my employer both times I had a kidney stone because not taking pain medication would result in extreme discomfort at my desk and frequent nausea. Taking pain medication, however, would still leave me unfit to work. Story 103. If I can't function at all or if I have a stomach bug, I won't do anything, even if I have a mild stomach bug. Story 104. I will not waste a good day off being sick. I will go to work, and on the day I feel better, I will call in sick and tell them it got worse. Story 105. I work from home, so anything that affects my eyes or head can be challenging. However, I can usually push through everything else. When I worked in an office, our vice president disliked it when we came to work sick. I often found myself wondering if they would be upset with me for coming in while feeling unwell. Story 106. I work from home in front of a computer screen. The only time I missed work due to illness was when I had a severe migraine. I felt awful. I texted my boss, who was understanding, as I had to miss some meetings and spent those days reading various reports that I needed for work instead of being at my computer. Story 107. I would have to be nearly hospitalized not to go. We only get 10 days of paid time off, and that is not much for a single mom. Story 108. Honestly, I have children and we do well enough financially. However, every shift I work means that I can provide better for them, have more adventures together, and enjoy our lives. If I'm missing work, it's because I am very sick and unable to get out of bed, or because I have something contagious that is not safe for others to be around. But if I have a cold, a headache, or a sore throat, then I will still be there. Story 109. I don't need to be sick at all to call in sick to work. I will call in because I don't want to be there. Story 110. When I had an office job with my own office, not a cubicle, and a door that I could close, I would go in even if I was sick. Vomiting was usually my sign for being too sick at that job. Now that I work directly with the public, I won't go in if I have any kind of sickness. They will manage without me, and I'm not going to spread illness just for a few extra dollars that day. I imagine if I were living paycheck to paycheck, I might be more willing to work while sick, but judging by how unreliable most of my peers are when it comes to calling out, perhaps not. Story 111. I serve in the military. If someone comes in sick, I will address the situation directly and insist they leave. If I am unwell, I will not report for duty. I prefer to manage with one person absent for a few days rather than risk 4 others becoming ill due to an infected individual being present. The only exception is if someone's life or limb is at stake. In that case, I will wear a mask and do my duty. Story 112. If I wake up and feel anything other than perfectly normal, I take a sick day. I am a civil servant with approximately 1,400 hours of paid sick leave. I can take the time. Story 113. At my last job, my supervisor would have brought my lifeless body in, to be honest. I didn't call in unless I physically couldn't make it or was hospitalized. I didn't want to miss work. My clients needed me, and unfortunately, missing work often meant someone went without assistance. Story 114. I work a corporate desk job, and most of the time, nothing I do is particularly time-sensitive. I can also work from home if I'm not feeling well. If I'm feeling unwell, I'll work from home. If I have a fever, migraine, or stomach bug, I'll call out. I make my choices wisely because I also need to accumulate goodwill for when I need to leave because my children or husband are sick. Story 115. I usually ask myself if I can still function relatively normally. If I believe that I can, then I go in. If not, I stay home. This is unless it is towards the end of the year and I know that my sick days will reset soon. I will call in sick for just having a few sniffles if I have the time to do so. Story 116. Unfortunately, my current position involves assisting a friend significantly, while also providing me with considerable support and restoring security to my life. There is only one other person in my role who works at the opposite end of the week. Therefore, unless I am extremely unwell, I must work. I have very minimal contact with people and sit alone in an office. Story 117. I work remotely. The only sick day I had in the past 3 years was when I got pneumonia and was so ill that I took myself to the emergency room. Otherwise, I'm working. I say this as someone who is currently feeling miserable on the couch and dreading work tomorrow. Story 118. Do you want to cry? Yes, I think that's my fine line between laziness and feeling overwhelmed. There are days like that when you have the energy, but just the thought of going through everything again makes you want to cry. Stop, I need to rejuvenate. Story 119. I work in an office and we follow a hybrid model. Now that we have the option, we all work from home when we are sick. No one wants to spread viruses to others. I take fewer sick days now and only take a day off if I have a fever and am unable to function. Otherwise, I power through while keeping my distance from everyone else. Story 120. Borderline dying, broken bones. Once I start moving, I begin to feel better. I believe that we, as a society, are too protective of our immune systems, which may make us weaker in the long run. Story 121. If I physically cannot do my job because it is quite physical or if I am likely to get my coworkers sick. On most days, if I call out, I will be negatively impacting my coworkers due to limited staffing. Story 122. Feeling too sick means being unable to shower, run errands, use social media, or get out of bed except to go to the bathroom and eat. If you can shower, drive, and use your computer, then you can work. Story 123. Any level of illness qualifies along with mental health days. My 15 days are available for use whenever needed. Additionally, if schedules prevent you from taking annual leave, we are encouraged to use a sick day instead. Story 124. Having a temperature of over 99 degrees qualifies as a fever for me, as my body tends to run a bit colder. I also work in an assisted living facility, so it is necessary to report when I am unwell. Story 125. If I can't get out of bed due to illness and need to sleep all day to recover, it can be challenging. The last time it happened was 2 years ago. I stayed in bed for 30 hours, only waking up to eat and drink water. After resting, I felt much better and returned to work the next day, wearing a mask. It frustrates me when people stay home because of a cold or similar ailment. Just wear a mask and go to work. If you can work from home, that's perfectly fine. Just do that. Story 126. Working from home sometimes fosters a culture of working while being unwell, which I dislike. If I have a stomach issue, I take time off. If I have a cold that makes me feel foggy or a fever, I also take time off. Occasionally, I wake up with a slight headache or simply feel unproductive, and that results in a mental health day. Story 127. Only if I'm sick will I be at work. I cannot afford to take the day off. Story 128. If I have the slightest hint of a cold, I'm out. I have many sick days from my union contract, and there have been several days when I call in sick because I'm tired of working that week. I am frustrated with work, my job, and the management. Story 129. 1. Mental health day. Fever and feeling fatigued make me hesitate to drive for my commute. My work truly requires being in the office or lab. Many of us, even if slightly sick with a cold, will wear an N95 mask and keep going. Story 130. Not very often unless I literally cannot be upright. However, at the slightest hint of illness, I work from home. I feel frustrated with coworkers who bring their germs to work and infect others. Story 131. I had gastrointestinal issues for 3 days while pregnant, with vomiting for 2 days and a third day to recover. I received criticism for missing so much work, but I also faced criticism for going to work while I had a severe flu and cough. They told me I should have stayed home to avoid getting others sick. Story 132. I really feel unwell, but I understand that my coworkers do not want to get sick either. Story 133. Fever, chills, and fatigue. A sore throat also appears. That's how I know things are going to get worse. Story 134. I used to avoid calling in sick, but this year I've had enough. Many people at my workplace call in sick, so I decided to do the same. I've used all my sick days and then some. Story 135. If I am experiencing uncontrollable issues, then I will not be at work. Other than that, I would need to be in significant pain to call in. Story 136. Pre-COVID. I have to be like 1 foot balancing on the edge of a grave. After COVID, if I'm not feeling it, I call it a mental health day. See you tomorrow, maybe. Story 137. My job treats calling out sick as a serious offense. So unless you are extremely unwell, you better show up. Story 138. I work from home, so it's not as straightforward for me. I'm not going to make anyone else sick. Sick days exist for a reason. If I feel unwell and there are no active emergencies at work, I'm taking a sick day. I'm honest with my manager. I'll say I feel bad, but I have a couple of important calls in the morning. I'll take those calls, but then I'm going to leave early, take some medication, and rest. He's always understanding about it. I've had times when I was quite ill, but work was also very demanding. That happened to me this past February. In that situation, I work a full day, but I notice my illness extends because I'm not resting. I've been in many meetings lately where someone sounds very sick. They're apologizing because they need to leave for a doctor's appointment. I think that's concerning. Many of them are older, and I worry more about their recovery. The world isn't going to end if they take a sick day or two. Story 139. I remember once I got pneumonia during the second week I was at Geico. You weren't allowed to miss any work in the first month of training, or you would get fired. I had pneumonia for about a week during training. It was the worst week of my life. Story 140. I have never missed work due to illness. I have been unwell, but I always go in because bills will not pay themselves. Story 141. Am I at a job where I get paid sick days or not? Not working will be a major financial burden. If I can perform my duties at an acceptable level, then I will work from home. However, if I'm highly contagious and cannot work from home, I will not go in. If I can get out of bed and go to work, then I will work. Unfortunately, this ultimately depends on my overall well-being. Story 142. As a teacher, after the middle of May, someone could mention another person giving me a dirty look, and that would be enough to make me feel unwell enough to stay home. Story 143. As someone who processes call-outs for a living, take those days off as needed. You do not owe me an explanation for why you are not coming in. No justification is necessary. That is your time, use it as you see fit. Story 144. My personal opinion is that you need to be able to do your job without posing a safety or infection hazard to yourself or others. If you cannot do that, then you should not come in. We all know this is not how it always plays out in real life, though. Story 145. I am rarely physically sick, but I am not ashamed to take a mental health day now and then. It makes me more effective afterward, and toughing it out makes me feel sadder and slower. Story 146. I am a physician. There is no backup, so unless I am extremely unwell or have a high fever, I will be going in. Story 147. When I am unwell, I take mental health days when I need time off to focus on myself and do whatever I want. Story 148. I think it is just in my nature to be stubborn or foolish. I started experiencing chest pain with a quarter of my shift left and thought I was fine while rubbing my chest. I finally left and went to urgent care, where they advised me to go to the emergency room after waiting 2 hours. I was admitted for 5 days with walking pneumonia, which my friend apparently gave me, and sepsis. Additionally, one time before that, I broke out in hives all over my body, from head to knees. I have no idea what caused it, maybe stress, and I was advised to leave. Story 149. If you have anything contagious, stay home. If you are on medication that affects your ability to drive, stay home. Other than those two, it is subjective. Story 150. If something prevents me from focusing or doing my job, I will stay home. I don't want to go in just to be miserable without accomplishing anything. I can do that at home. Typically, stomach issues are what keep me from going to work. Having to rush to the bathroom repeatedly is not compatible with working. Additionally, I often feel feverish and dehydrated, and I just feel unwell. Story 151. Before I started my own business and became my own boss, it depended on whether I liked my workplace and environment. If I did, I would do everything I could to feel better as soon as possible. However, I also wanted to avoid being contagious. If I disliked the workplace, I might speculate that I was sick and call in sick, even if I was not. Story 152. I work from home. Unless I can't talk, have gastrointestinal issues, or something else that would keep me off the phone, I'll work. I get sick leave and regular paid time off, and I consider both valuable. So I'll call out sparingly. Story 153. I am an agricultural worker, so I am unlikely to get anyone sick, as I rarely work in close environments with other people. The job is dangerous, physically demanding, and often uncomfortable. If I cannot focus mentally or if I am not physically able to move as I should, I will stay home. Story 154. It depends on whether I am in the office or not. The standard varies significantly if I am at risk of infecting someone else. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.